But hold on. Wait a minute. I was just wondering what Burkina Faso would be like when they finally form an alliance with um, Egypt. You know, AES, which is the Sahel bloc, has become so sweet and so appealing, appetizing. Should I say appealing or appetizing? To the point that almost all West African countries want to join the bloc because it seems that ECOWAS is no longer serving the purpose of its creation. Most countries are leaving ECOWAS. Some countries are leaving ECOWAS, citing that the purpose of forming ECOWAS bloc is no longer what is happening in ECOWAS. I think politics has taken over, Western interference has taken over, and you see, these countries are leaving. I believe very soon, or maybe one day, we won't be surprised that Ghana will say, oh, enough is enough. We are leaving. We are no longer interested in this bloc. Come on. I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking. Because the reason Burkina Faso left ECOWAS is simply because they are not fulfilling their agreements. I don't know whatever they agreed on, but I think ECOWAS is no longer serving the purpose of its creation, so they have to leave. And I felt like there's a lot of Western interference in ECOWAS. If you don't know, ECOWAS is more like the body that joins all African countries together, most African countries together. So they are more like a help. They are more like a brothers platform. We are brothers. We are one. We are Africa. We are one. If you have a need, come to me. If I have, I will grant. I will give it to you. That's what ECOWAS is more like. Now, some of these countries living the ECOWAS are thinking, or should I say, they believe that the main purpose of creating ECOWAS is no longer there. So they have to leave. And they are no longer being protected because in a situation where an organization is being manipulated by an outsider, I don't think there's a security there, or I don't think there's a need to still be there. And that was what Abraham Traore said and discovered and said, for that reason, we will no longer be there. So they have to leave together with some other countries. Um, Niger. Uh, so far, other African countries are also looking at. So after Ibrahim Traore left, they formed their own bloc known as AES, Alliance of Sahel States. And so far, they have been making a lot of progress, and they have granted security to their members, and it's looking more appealing, or should I say appetizer? I don't know the right word to use, to other West African countries, and other countries are looking to join. Sudan, who knows, Egypt are also on the line. Now imagine what it will look like if Burkina Faso had finally formed alliance with Egypt. And as you don't, in case you don't know, I think Egypt is the country with the toughest military in Africa, if I'm not mistaken. Even if they are not, but they are one of the countries with the toughest country, or with the toughest or strongest military in Africa general. So imagine what it will look like when Burkina Faso have this country by their side. Anyway, let me not bore you with a long talk. Let's just calm down, watch this video to the end.
In a dramatic geopolitical shift that is already sending shockwaves across Africa and beyond, the government of Egypt has officially announced its decision to join the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, marking one of the most significant realignments in continental security politics in recent years. The announcement came late last night in Cairo, where Egyptian officials confirmed that military personnel would be deployed to Burkina Faso under a newly signed defense cooperation agreement with the Alliance of Sahel States. The bloc, currently led by Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, Assimi Goïta of Mali, and Abdurrahmane Tiani of Niger. According to preliminary details, Egypt's deployment will include military advisors, counterterrorism specialists, logistics officers, and a limited combat-ready contingent tasked with assisting in operations against armed insurgent groups operating across the Sahel region. For months, the AES, a security alliance formed by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger following their withdrawal from ECOWAS, has sought broader partnerships beyond West Africa. Analysts had speculated about potential cooperation with North African states, but few anticipated such a rapid and formal alignment with Egypt. Sources within the AES confirmed that negotiations between Cairo and Ouagadougou intensified over the past several weeks. High-level delegations reportedly traveled quietly between Cairo, Bamako, and Niamey before the agreement was finalized. In a televised address from Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré described Egypt's entry into the alliance as a historic step toward African military sovereignty and collective security. He emphasized that the partnership was not directed against any external power, but was instead focused on stabilizing African territory through African cooperation. Egypt's involvement carries deep strategic significance. As one of Africa's most powerful militaries, Egypt possesses advanced air defense systems, intelligence infrastructure, and extensive counterinsurgency experience, particularly from its long fight against militant groups in the Sinai Peninsula. Military analysts believe Egypt's logistical capabilities and training programs could dramatically strengthen AES operational capacity, especially in northern Burkina Faso, where insurgent attacks have continued to destabilize rural communities. A senior Egyptian defense official, speaking anonymously, stated, "This mission is about preventing the spread of extremism across the African continent. Instability in the Sahel does not remain in the Sahel. It spreads." Initial troop movements reportedly began within hours of the announcement. Transport aircraft believed to belong to the Egyptian Air Force were tracked landing at an airbase outside Ouagadougou early this morning. Witnesses near the base described seeing armored vehicles being unloaded, alongside personnel in desert camouflage uniforms. Burkinabe defense officials confirmed that Egyptian forces would initially operate in advisory and support roles but did not rule out joint combat missions if required. The focus areas reportedly include intelligence sharing and surveillance coordination, training of rapid response units, border stabilization operations, counter-IED expertise, drone and aerial reconnaissance support. The reaction from neighboring countries has been mixed. Officials within ECOWAS have not yet released an official statement, but diplomatic insiders suggest that emergency consultations may be underway. Meanwhile, France, whose military presence in the Sahel has significantly diminished in recent years, is said to be closely monitoring the development. The evolving security landscape further shifts the balance of influence in a region that has increasingly moved away from traditional Western partnerships. Russia and Turkey, both of whom have expanded their footprints in parts of Africa, have also remained silent so far. However, observers believe Cairo's involvement could complicate existing strategic calculations. The Sahel has long been described as one of the world's most volatile security corridors, stretching from Mauritania to Sudan. Armed groups affiliated with extremist networks have exploited weak state control, porous borders, and economic hardship. With Egypt now entering the AES framework, the alliance gains a northern gateway with Mediterranean access, advanced military training infrastructure, potential intelligence cooperation stretching into North Africa. Some analysts believe this could mark the beginning of a broader Pan-African military bloc, one less dependent on Western-led frameworks. Others warn that increased militarization could escalate tensions if not managed carefully. Strategically, Egypt has its own reasons. Security experts suggest that Cairo is concerned about instability moving eastward toward Sudan and Libya. Strengthening the Sahel could create a buffer zone against extremist spillover. Furthermore, Egypt's leadership has repeatedly emphasized African solidarity in recent diplomatic speeches. In a brief statement released this morning, Egypt's presidency declared, Egypt stands with African nations in defending sovereignty, territorial integrity, and collective stability. However, the scale of the troop deployment remains unclear. Officials have declined to provide exact numbers, citing operational security. On the streets of Ouagadougou, reactions appear divided. Some residents welcomed the move, expressing hope that additional support would reduce attacks in rural areas. Others expressed caution, questioning whether foreign troops, even African ones, could complicate internal dynamics. Local civil society organizations have called for transparency and clear timelines regarding the deployment. As Egyptian military units begin coordinating with Burkinabe forces, the Sahel enters what may be a transformative phase. Will this alliance stabilize the region? Will it provoke external geopolitical countermoves? Or will it redefine African-led security cooperation entirely? For now, troop convoys continue moving northward. Strategic meetings are taking place behind closed doors, and the continent watches closely. And according to sources within the AES command structure, this deployment may only be the first phase of a much larger strategic shift that has yet to be fully revealed. As the first Egyptian units settled into their assigned coordination zones outside Ouagadougou, senior commanders from both sides began closed-door operational briefings that reportedly lasted well into the night. Sources within Burkina Faso's defense ministry revealed that the joint planning sessions focused heavily on northern corridors near Djibo and the tri-border region, areas that have seen repeated attacks over the past 2 years. Satellite imagery analysts observed increased activity at key military installations, including expanded perimeter security and newly erected communications arrays. Egyptian signals intelligence specialists were said to be working alongside Burkinabe officers to establish a unified command communication grid, something AES planners have long struggled to fully implement across member states. In Cairo, the decision sparked intense debate within political and security circles. While officials framed the move as a continental duty, some critics questioned whether Egypt was overextending its military commitments at a time of economic strain at home. Supporters, however, argued that stabilizing the Sahel serves Egypt's long-term security interests by containing extremist networks before they migrate northward. Meanwhile, in Bamako and Niamey, leaders of the AES reportedly welcomed Egypt's entry as a sign that the alliance is evolving beyond a regional pact into a broader continental security framework. Assimi Goïta is said to have held a secure call with Ibrahim Traoré shortly after the first Egyptian aircraft landed, expressing readiness to expand joint drills across Mali's central regions. Abdurrahmane Tiani reportedly signaled that Niger could soon host Egyptian trainers at select desert warfare facilities. International observers began piecing together what this might mean for the broader balance of power in West Africa. For years, foreign military footprints in the Sahel were dominated by Western powers. That influence gradually receded following political shifts in several countries. Now, Egypt's entrance adds a new dynamic, one that is African-led but still geopolitically consequential. On the ground in Burkina Faso, the immediate priority appears to be intelligence integration. Egyptian reconnaissance drones were reportedly deployed for joint surveillance flights over high-risk zones, though officials have declined to confirm operational details. Local communities in affected regions have described hearing increased aerial patrols at night, a development some interpret as a sign of more proactive counterinsurgency efforts. Economic implications are also beginning to surface. Egyptian defense contractors are rumored to be negotiating equipment maintenance agreements and training infrastructure upgrades. If formalized, these contracts could deepen long-term cooperation beyond the immediate security mission. Analysts suggest this may mark the beginning of broader economic and industrial ties between North Africa and the Sahel Bloc. At the same time, diplomatic channels across the continent have grown noticeably active. The African Union has reportedly requested formal briefings on the structure of Egypt's involvement to ensure alignment with continental security frameworks. While no objections have been publicly raised, there is cautious attention to how the AES's expansion might reshape inter-African alliances. In Ouagadougou, public messaging has intensified. Government media outlets are portraying the deployment as proof that Burkina Faso is no longer isolated, but instead building powerful African partnerships. Social media within the country shows a mixture of optimism and skepticism, with some citizens praising the move as bold and others urging transparency about costs and duration. Security experts warn that the coming weeks will be critical. If joint operations result in measurable improvements in territorial control, Egypt's decision could be viewed as a strategic success. If violence escalates or insurgent groups adapt quickly, critics may question the sustainability of the mission. Late this evening, unconfirmed reports suggested that a high-level AES defense summit may soon be convened in Ouagadougou, potentially formalizing a broader continental security doctrine. Sources indicate that additional African states have expressed quiet interest in observer status within the alliance, though no official announcements have been made. For now, Egyptian armored vehicles remain stationed at key transit points. Joint patrol planning continues, and regional capitals are watching closely. The deployment has moved from rumor to reality, and its consequences, political, military, and economic, are only beginning to unfold. Behind the scenes, however, there are indications that this agreement includes provisions that have not yet been disclosed publicly. Clauses that could significantly expand the scope of cooperation far beyond troop deployment. What those provisions entail, and how they might reshape the Sahel's future, remains unclear. Whispers about the undisclosed provisions began circulating within diplomatic circles almost immediately after the joint communiqué was released. According to sources familiar with the negotiations, the agreement between Egypt and the AES is not limited to troop deployment alone. It reportedly includes long-term defense industrial cooperation, intelligence fusion centers, and the possibility of establishing a permanent joint training academy somewhere within Burkina Faso. Security analysts say such a move would represent a structural shift rather than a temporary intervention. A permanent training facility would allow Egyptian officers to rotate through the Sahel on a scheduled basis, embedding doctrine, tactics, and operational standards that could reshape AES forces over time. Convoys were seen moving north from Ouagadougou under heavy escort, suggesting that forward operating positions are already being reinforced. Local officials in Kaya and Dori confirmed increased military coordination, though they declined to comment on Egyptian troop numbers. Villagers in some high-risk areas reported seeing joint patrols for the first time, Burkinabe soldiers traveling alongside foreign counterparts wearing Egyptian insignia. In Cairo, senior defense officials defended the deployment before parliamentary committees, describing the mission as strategically preventative. They argued that instability in the Sahel threatens not only West Africa but also North Africa through trafficking routes, arms flows, and extremist recruitment pipelines that stretch across the Sahara. Meanwhile, within the AES leadership, the tone has grown increasingly confident. Ibrahim Traoré reportedly told close advisors that Egypt's entry proves the alliance is no longer a regional reaction but a continental project. Assimi Goïta is said to be preparing a public address emphasizing expanded joint exercises, while Abdourahmane Tiani has reportedly instructed Niger's defense ministry to draft proposals for cross-border air coordination. There are also indications that Egyptian technical teams are evaluating airfields in Burkina Faso for potential upgrades. If implemented, these improvements could allow larger transport aircraft and possibly advanced reconnaissance platforms to operate more efficiently in the region. Military observers caution that such enhancements would significantly boost AES rapid response capability. Beyond military matters, economic discussions appear to be quietly unfolding. Trade delegations from Cairo are rumored to be exploring agricultural and mining partnerships tied to the broader security arrangement. Analysts suggest that Egypt may view AES cooperation as an opportunity to deepen economic integration with West Africa while securing strategic influence. International reactions remain cautious but attentive. Diplomats across Europe and North America are monitoring the situation closely, aware that Egypt's involvement changes the calculus of influence in a region long shaped by external powers. No formal objections have been raised publicly, yet private discussions reportedly reflect concern about how this evolving alliance may affect existing security partnerships. On the ground in northern Burkina Faso, early reports indicate a temporary lull in certain high-risk corridors. Whether this is a direct result of the deployment or simply a tactical pause by insurgent groups remains unclear. Military strategists warn that armed factions often retreat and reorganize when faced with new force dynamics before launching counter-operations. In Ouagadougou, security presence around government facilities has visibly increased. Roadblocks, joint patrols, and heightened surveillance suggest authorities are preparing for potential retaliation or destabilization attempts. Officials insist these measures are precautionary. Late tonight, regional intelligence sources hinted that a broader AES Egypt defense framework could soon be unveiled. one that may include coordinated airspace monitoring across multiple member states and an integrated counter-terrorism command structure linking West and North Africa. If confirmed, such a development would mark one of the most ambitious African-led security realignments in recent history. Yet despite the bold declarations and visible troop movements, many critical questions remain unanswered. How long will Egyptian forces remain? Will their mandate expand beyond advisory roles? And how will insurgent networks respond to this new alliance? For now, armored convoys continue moving under the Sahel sun, diplomatic cables are being exchanged at a rapid pace, and preparations appear underway for what insiders describe as Phase 2 of the operation, a phase whose scope has not yet been revealed publicly. By dawn, activity around key military corridors had intensified. Surveillance flights were reportedly extended deeper into contested zones, while Joint Command vehicles established mobile coordination points closer to vulnerable communities. Officers familiar with the operation described Phase 2 as a transition from assessment to targeted stabilization, a shift that suggests more direct operational involvement may be imminent. Unconfirmed intelligence briefings indicate that Egyptian counter-IED specialists have begun working alongside Burkina engineering units to clear supply routes frequently targeted by roadside explosives. Securing these corridors is seen as essential to restoring trade and humanitarian movement in regions that have endured repeated disruptions. At the same time, encrypted communication systems believed to be supplied by Egyptian defense technicians are said to be replacing older radio networks previously considered vulnerable to interception. Analysts argue that this alone could dramatically improve battlefield coordination across remote Sahel terrain. In diplomatic circles, speculation is mounting that Egypt's entry into the AES may encourage other African nations to explore observer or partnership status. Officials in several North and Central African capitals are reportedly studying the framework closely, weighing both security benefits and geopolitical implications. Within Burkina Faso, the government has begun a public messaging campaign emphasizing sovereignty and African solidarity. State broadcasters highlighted images of joint training sessions, portraying the partnership as an example of continental unity rather than foreign intervention. Civil society leaders, however, continue to request transparency regarding mission timelines and operational boundaries. Security experts caution that insurgent groups are unlikely to remain passive. Historically, armed factions in the Sahel have adapted quickly to shifting force dynamics, often testing new alliances with sudden asymmetric strikes. Intelligence sources suggest that monitoring has intensified along porous border zones to anticipate possible retaliatory actions. Meanwhile, logistical buildup appears to be expanding beyond immediate combat support. Reports indicate Egyptian military medical teams have arrived to assist in field hospitals, while supply depots are being reorganized to accommodate joint operations. If confirmed, this signals preparation for sustained engagement rather than a short-term advisory visit. Economic observers are also watching closely. Infrastructure projects tied to security corridors, including road rehabilitation and communications upgrades, are reportedly under discussion. Analysts believe such initiatives could serve dual purposes, strengthening military mobility while stimulating local economies that have been weakened by instability. International reaction remains measured but vigilant. Some global powers appear to be reassessing their diplomatic posture toward the AES in light of Egypt's involvement. While no confrontational statements have emerged, private consultations among foreign ministries are believed to be ongoing. Late this evening, sources within the alliance hinted that a multinational exercise involving AES forces and Egyptian units may be announced within days. If carried out, it would be the first visible demonstration of integrated operational readiness under the expanded alliance framework. Yet beneath the official optimism, there are signs of mounting pressure. Increased security around strategic installations in Ouagadougou suggests authorities are bracing for potential destabilization attempts, whether through coordinated attacks or information warfare campaigns aimed at undermining public confidence. As night falls over the Sahel, armored vehicles remain stationed along key transit points, joint patrols continue sweeping rural corridors, and high-level strategists deliberate over the next moves behind secured doors. And according to insiders close to the alliance, what the public has seen so far represents only the visible surface of a broader security architecture that is still being assembled, one that could fundamentally reshape power alignments across West and North Africa in ways that are only beginning to take form. Behind closed doors in Ouagadougou, senior defense planners are reportedly drafting what they describe as a continental shield framework, a doctrine that would formally link North African air surveillance with Sahel ground operations. If adopted, this would mean real-time intelligence sharing between Egyptian monitoring stations and AES field commanders, significantly shortening response times to emerging threats. Sources familiar with the discussion say the concept goes beyond Burkina Faso alone. The framework could allow coordinated airspace monitoring stretching from the Mediterranean approaches down through the Sahara, effectively creating a layered security belt across multiple countries. Military analysts note that such integration would represent one of the most ambitious African-led security coordination efforts in decades. In northern Burkina Faso, joint patrols have reportedly begun testing rapid deployment drills. Witnesses in rural towns described convoys moving swiftly through strategic routes, accompanied by surveillance drones circling overhead. While officials insist these are precautionary measures, their frequency suggests preparations for a broader operational rollout. Meanwhile, intelligence officials warn that insurgent factions are closely studying the new alliance. Intercepted communications reportedly indicate attempts to probe for weaknesses in newly established coordination systems. Security services across the region have elevated alert levels, anticipating possible efforts to challenge the partnership early in its formation. In Cairo, state-aligned analysts are framing the mission as a long-term investment in continental stability. Commentaries emphasize that securing the Sahel indirectly strengthens North Africa by reducing arms trafficking and extremist recruitment flows that traverse desert corridors. The messaging underscores that the operation is strategic rather than symbolic. At the same time, diplomatic engagement appears to be intensifying. Quiet meetings between AES envoys and representatives from other African states have reportedly taken place on the sidelines of regional forums. While no additional memberships have been announced, insiders suggest that exploratory conversations are underway. Economic dimensions are becoming more visible as well. Trade officials are said to be evaluating transport corridors that could link Sahel markets with North African ports. Infrastructure upgrades under security protection could potentially reshape commercial routes long disrupted by instability. Within Burkina Faso, the government continues reinforcing internal security around major urban centers. Authorities cite precautionary measures, though analysts interpret the posture as preparation for potential hybrid threats, including cyber disruptions or coordinated propaganda campaigns designed to test public confidence in the alliance. Late tonight, unconfirmed reports suggest that a formal joint command center may soon be inaugurated, symbolizing the operational merger of Egyptian and AES coordination structures. If established, such a center would serve as the nerve hub for cross-border intelligence and tactical planning. Yet despite the accelerating momentum, critical uncertainties persist. The durability of the alliance will depend not only on military success but also on public trust, economic follow-through, and regional diplomacy. Any miscalculation could invite external pressure or embolden adversarial actors. For now, troop rotations continue quietly, technical teams remain active in upgrading systems, and high-level strategists refine contingency plans. The Sahel stands at a pivotal crossroads, with a new alignment taking shape under the desert sky. And according to senior sources, the next announcement, expected within days, could redefine the scope of this mission even further, potentially expanding its mandate beyond stabilization into a fully integrated continental defense initiative. The anticipated announcement began taking shape sooner than many expected. Late-night movements around secured government compounds in Ouagadougou signaled that preparations were underway for a high-level declaration. Diplomats, military attachés, and regional observers were reportedly invited under tight security protocols, fueling speculation that the alliance was about to formalize a broader expansion of its mandate. Insiders suggest the new framework may include coordinated cross-border strike authorization among AES members, supported by Egyptian reconnaissance and logistical infrastructure. Such a measure would allow faster pursuit of armed groups operating across porous frontiers, a long-standing challenge in the Sahel conflict landscape. Simultaneously, Egyptian engineering teams are believed to be surveying strategic road networks linking northern Burkina Faso to neighboring states. Upgrading these arteries would not only enhance troop mobility but also restore commercial flow to isolated communities. Observers note that stabilizing trade routes is often as critical as direct military engagement in weakening insurgent influence. Reports are also emerging of expanded joint training sessions, where Burkinab and Egyptian officers are conducting simulation exercises focused on rapid urban response scenarios. Analysts interpret this as preparation for potential retaliatory attacks targeting population centers in response to the strengthened alliance. In regional capitals, diplomatic conversations are intensifying. Governments across West and North Africa are carefully weighing how this new alignment may influence their own security calculations. Some see opportunity for collective resilience, others remain cautious about shifting balances of influence. Within Burkina Faso's urban centers, public opinion remains mixed but attentive. Government-aligned media outlets emphasize sovereignty and continental unity, while independent commentators continue pressing for transparency regarding costs, duration, and oversight mechanisms. Security agencies have reportedly heightened cyber defenses amid concerns that information warfare campaigns could attempt to sow confusion or distrust. Intelligence sources warn that destabilization efforts may not only take the form of armed attacks but also digital disruptions aimed at undermining morale. Meanwhile, AES commanders are said to be refining contingency plans for coordinated operations that could unfold simultaneously in multiple regions. Egyptian aerial surveillance capabilities, if fully integrated, would provide real-time battlefield visibility that Sahel forces have historically lacked. Economic strategists are also watching closely. If stability improves even incrementally, it could unlock mining, agriculture, and infrastructure investments that have been stalled for years. The linkage between security and economic recovery is increasingly central to the alliance's public narrative. As midnight approaches, anticipation grows around the rumored joint address expected from alliance leaders. Observers believe the speech may outline a multi-year roadmap, transforming what began as an emergency security pact into a structured continental defense partnership. For now, convoys remain positioned along strategic corridors, surveillance aircraft continue periodic sweeps, and command rooms stay illuminated deep into the night. The momentum behind this new alignment shows no signs of slowing. And according to high-level sources, the forthcoming declaration may not only confirm the next operational phase but also reveal additional states quietly aligning behind the scenes, a development that could significantly alter the geopolitical map of the Sahel and beyond. Just before sunrise, motorcades began arriving at a heavily guarded government complex in Ouagadougou. The atmosphere was tense but ceremonial, a blend of military precision and political symbolism. Flags of the AES member states stood alongside that of Egypt, signaling what many observers are now calling a defining moment in modern African security realignment. Inside the secured hall, senior commanders, diplomats, and intelligence officials gathered as cameras were carefully positioned for a live broadcast. Sources say the delay in the official announcement was deliberate. Final clauses of the expanded framework were being reviewed and encrypted communication channels tested one last time before public confirmation. When the address finally began, it was framed not as an escalation, but as an evolution. Ibrahim Traore reportedly declared that the partnership had entered a structural phase, confirming the establishment of a joint strategic coordination command headquartered in Ouagadougou, with integrated liaison offices connecting Cairo, Bamako, and Niamey. The message emphasized African-led defense architecture, technological modernization, and long-term stabilization goals. Shortly after, Egyptian officials reaffirmed that their presence would expand into intelligence integration, airspace monitoring support, and advanced counter-terrorism training. While they stopped short of confirming offensive joint operations, they did not rule out coordinated security actions where necessary. Security analysts quickly noted the language shift. What began as advisory deployment now appears to be evolving into synchronized operational readiness. Reports emerging from northern Burkina Faso suggest that reconnaissance activity has intensified. Surveillance drones and patrol aircraft have reportedly expanded their coverage radius, focusing on remote zones long considered insurgent strongholds. Local military sources hint that specific high-value targets may already be under monitoring. At the same time, encrypted military logistics convoys were observed moving towards strategic border corridors. Though officials describe these as routine stabilization deployments, the scale suggests preparation for multi-point operations. Across the region, diplomatic reactions are becoming more pronounced. Some neighboring governments have publicly welcomed the emphasis on African cooperation. Others are quietly recalibrating their own defense postures, wary of being left outside an emerging security bloc that now links North and West Africa more tightly than ever before. Meanwhile, international observers are closely analyzing satellite data and troop patterns, seeking clues about the alliance's next move. Intelligence circles speculate that synchronized cross-border exercises could be imminent, a visible demonstration of interoperability designed to deter insurgent offensives. Back in Ouagadougou, security presence has intensified around major infrastructure nodes, airports, telecommunication centers, and energy facilities. Officials cite precaution, but analysts interpret the measures as anticipation of asymmetric retaliation attempts. Economic ministers have also begun referencing a parallel stability dividend plan, suggesting that infrastructure rehabilitation, protected by enhanced security corridors, could soon roll out. If successful, this would anchor the military partnership in tangible civilian benefits. As night descends once more over the Sahel, the mood is one of cautious momentum. The alliance has moved beyond symbolism into structured coordination. Troop rotations continue. Surveillance networks hum quietly. Strategy rooms remain active. And according to insiders familiar with classified briefings, What has been publicly revealed so far represents only the opening layer of a far broader security doctrine, one that could soon introduce joint rapid response brigades operating across multiple territories simultaneously. If that phase is confirmed, the Sahel will not merely be witnessing a partnership. It will be entering a new era of continental military alignment whose consequences are only beginning to unfold. Within hours of the joint declaration, encrypted communications reportedly flowed between Ouagadougou and forward operating zones in the north. Field commanders were instructed to transition from observation posture to coordinated readiness status, a term analysts interpret as authorization to respond immediately to verified threats without prolonged approval chains. Convoys carrying mixed units of Burkinab forces and Egyptian advisors were seen repositioning along strategic highways before dispersing towards secondary routes. The pattern suggested decentralization, a move designed to reduce vulnerability while expanding operational coverage. Intelligence officials believe this structure allows rapid concentration of force if actionable targets emerge. Meanwhile, aerial reconnaissance flights increased in both frequency and altitude variation. Security experts note that layered air surveillance, combining high-altitude monitoring with lower tactical sweeps, significantly improves detection of hidden movement across desert terrain. Though officials decline to disclose operational specifics, defense analysts say this capability could disrupt long-established smuggling and insurgent supply lines. Diplomatic channels across the continent remain highly active. Several governments are said to be requesting briefings on the operational model now being implemented. While no additional accessions have been confirmed, insiders suggest that observer delegations may soon visit Ouagadougou to assess the framework firsthand. Back in Cairo, strategic commentators have framed the deployment as part of a broader African security renaissance. They argue that cross-regional coordination reduces dependency on non-African military structures while strengthening continental resilience. Critics, however, caution that sustained operations require economic backing and careful management of public perception. On the ground in Burkina Faso, civilian reactions remain measured. Markets in major cities continue operating normally, though security checkpoints have multiplied. Authorities insist that visible patrols are precautionary and designed to reassure the public. Intelligence assessments circulating among regional analysts indicate that insurgent networks are adjusting tactics, dispersing into smaller cells rather than massing forces. Such shifts are common when confronted with improved surveillance capabilities. Security strategists warn that this phase could bring unpredictable, targeted incidents rather than large-scale assaults. At the same time, logistics activity near key airfields suggests preparation for extended operational cycles. Fuel reserves, communications equipment, and medical supplies have reportedly been expanded to sustain multi-week deployments without interruption. Late this evening, sources close to alliance planners hinted at the formation of a rapid continental response task group, a specialized unit trained for swift deployment across member territories within hours of verified intelligence alerts. If formally unveiled, this would represent a decisive step toward institutionalizing the alliance's military coordination. Analysts emphasize that the coming days will test the alliance's cohesion. Success will depend on seamless communication, disciplined rules of engagement, and visible improvements in security conditions. Any operational misstep could be amplified by adversarial propaganda efforts. For now, armored vehicles remain stationed at key junctions, aerial patrols continue tracing silent arcs across the Sahel sky, and command centers operate around the clock. The pace of activity suggests that the alliance is moving steadily from planning into execution. And according to senior security insiders, a coordinated field operation, potentially the first under the expanded framework, may be imminent, an operation that could define whether this new continental alignment marks a turning point or merely the beginning of a far more complex chapter in the Sahel's unfolding story. Just before midday, reports began surfacing from northern sectors indicating unusual coordinated movement across multiple operational zones. Local sources described synchronized patrols advancing along previously volatile corridors, supported by aerial surveillance overhead. While officials have not confirmed the launch of a formal joint operation, defense analysts believe this may be the first practical test of the newly established coordination structure. Encrypted briefings reportedly circulated among field commanders shortly after dawn, outlining predefined engagement protocols and cross-border intelligence thresholds. The speed at which units repositioned suggests that weeks of preparation had quietly preceded the public announcement of Egypt's expanded role. Military observers note that the integration of Egyptian reconnaissance capabilities appears to be central to this phase. By combining satellite data, drone feeds, and ground intelligence, alliance forces may now possess a broader operational picture than at any previous stage of the Sahel conflict. Analysts argue that this shift alone could alter insurgent mobility patterns. Communities in high-risk areas have reported increased security presence but relatively calm conditions so far. Market activity in several northern towns resumed under escort patrols, a development local officials describe as an early sign of restored confidence. However, security experts caution that insurgent networks often retreat temporarily before testing new alliances with sudden asymmetric actions. Behind the scenes, command centers in Ouagadougou and Cairo are believed to be operating on continuous coordination cycles. Intelligence fusion teams are reportedly analyzing real-time field data, refining predictive models to anticipate retaliatory moves. If successful, this could mark a turning point in how Sahel operations are conducted, shifting from reactive deployments to anticipatory containment. Diplomatic signals are also evolving. Regional envoys have quietly acknowledged that the AES Egypt framework may influence future African Union security dialogues. Though no formal endorsements have been issued, the scale and structure of the collaboration are prompting serious policy discussions. Economic stakeholders are watching closely as well. If security corridors stabilize, trade routes linking agricultural zones to urban markets could reopen more consistently. Infrastructure rehabilitation plans, previously delayed due to insecurity, may soon gain momentum under the protection of coordinated patrol networks. At the same time, intelligence agencies remain alert to potential hybrid responses. Analysts warn that adversarial actors could attempt cyber disruptions or misinformation campaigns aimed at portraying the alliance as destabilizing rather than stabilizing. Security services have reportedly strengthened monitoring of digital platforms in anticipation. As evening approaches, field reports suggest that alliance forces have secured several strategic transit points without major confrontation. While officials refrain from declaring operational success, the absence of immediate escalation is being interpreted cautiously as a positive signal. Still, insiders stress that the true measure of this partnership will not be a single operation but sustained control, community stabilization, and long-term deterrence. And according to sources within the alliance's strategic planning unit, what unfolds in the next 72 hours could determine whether this coordinated momentum consolidates into durable security gains, or triggers a more complex and unpredictable phase of confrontation across the Sahel. As the 72-hour window narrowed, tension quietly built across operational sectors. Intelligence streams flowing into the Joint Command Center in Ouagadougou reportedly showed fragmented but notable movement patterns in remote desert corridors. Analysts describe them as probing maneuvers, small-scale relocations possibly designed to test the alliance's surveillance reach. Field units were instructed to maintain controlled visibility rather than overextend. According to insiders, the strategy at this stage is not aggressive pursuit but controlled dominance, establishing presence, securing supply arteries, and denying strategic ground without triggering unnecessary escalation. In several northern districts, humanitarian convoys moved under joint escort for the first time in months. Aid coordinators cautiously welcomed the development, noting that improved security coverage could help reopen routes that had been deemed too risky. However, they also emphasized that sustained protection would be necessary to maintain momentum. Within the newly established coordination structure, Egyptian and AES officers are said to be rotating through joint planning simulations in real time, adapting contingency scenarios based on live intelligence updates. Defense experts argue that this kind of synchronized command modeling marks a significant leap from previous fragmented approaches in the region. Meanwhile, diplomatic channels remain active behind the scenes. Envoys from multiple African states have reportedly requested technical briefings on the operational architecture now in place. Though not publicly aligned, some governments appear eager to study the framework as a possible template for regional stabilization. Back on the ground, patrol patterns have shifted again. Rather than concentrating heavily in predictable zones, units are now dispersing into less monitored terrain, a sign that planners anticipate adaptive responses. Analysts caution that insurgent networks often attempt symbolic attacks to challenge newly formed alliances, making vigilance critical during this consolidation phase. Cybersecurity monitoring has also intensified. Intelligence officials warn that narratives attempting to distort the alliance's purpose are beginning to circulate in certain digital spaces. Authorities insist they are prepared to counter coordinated misinformation efforts aimed at undermining public confidence. As night falls across the Sahel, command centers remain fully staffed. Surveillance feeds continue streaming into secured briefing rooms. Convoys remain staged but mobile. The atmosphere is one of calculated patience rather than immediate confrontation. Sources close to the alliance suggest that a comprehensive operational review will take place at the end of this initial deployment cycle. The findings could determine whether troop levels expand, reposition, or transition toward a longer-term stabilization blueprint. For now, the region stands in a fragile balance, not yet transformed, but undeniably altered. The partnership has moved from announcement to execution, from symbolism to structured coordination. And according to senior planners, the coming days may reveal whether this carefully calibrated strategy succeeds in reshaping the security landscape, or whether unseen forces are preparing a response that could redefine the trajectory of this unfolding alliance. As the operational review window approached, senior commanders convened inside the fortified coordination compound on the outskirts of Ouagadougou. Multiple secure screens displayed live feeds from reconnaissance drones, patrol trackers, and regional intelligence dashboards. According to sources present, the early assessment indicated improved mobility control across several high-risk corridors, but also subtle warning signs of insurgent recalibration deeper into remote terrain. Rather than large-scale confrontations, analysts observed fragmentation. Small mobile units were reportedly dispersing into harder-to-monitor zones, avoiding predictable transit routes. This pattern, security experts say, often signals a transition into asymmetric tactics designed to test a new alliance's response time and resilience. In response, joint planners adjusted posture again. Instead of maintaining static checkpoints alone, rapid deployment teams were repositioned in concealed staging areas, prepared to respond within minutes to verified alerts. Egyptian advisors are believed to be assisting in refining these rapid response protocols, drawing from desert warfare experience accumulated over years of counterinsurgency operations. Meanwhile, confidence-building measures began unfolding in stabilized districts. Local administrators reopened certain municipal offices that had previously operated under limited hours due to security concerns. In some areas, schools resumed full schedules under reinforced patrol presence. These developments, while modest, are being presented by officials as indicators of gradual normalization. Behind the scenes, however, contingency planning remains intense. Intelligence briefings reportedly emphasize the possibility of coordinated symbolic attacks aimed at undermining the alliance's narrative of progress. Security forces have therefore expanded protective coverage around energy installations, communication towers, and key transport hubs. Diplomatically, the ripple effects continue spreading. Several African defense ministries are said to be analyzing the AES Egypt coordination model as a potential case study in cross-regional military integration. While formal endorsements remain cautious, private discussions reportedly reflect growing recognition that the security architecture in the Sahel is undergoing a structural transformation. Economic planners are also recalculating projections. If security corridors hold, infrastructure investments, particularly road rehabilitation and telecommunications expansion, could resume at a scale not seen in years. Officials believe visible economic recovery would strengthen public trust in the alliance's long-term viability. Late tonight, intelligence monitors reportedly detected unusual digital chatter in certain extremist-aligned channels. While no immediate threat has been confirmed, cybersecurity units have elevated monitoring protocols, anticipating potential attempts to disrupt communications or spread destabilizing misinformation. Despite the heightened vigilance, there is a measured sense of control within the command structure. The absence of major retaliatory strikes in the immediate aftermath of deployment is being interpreted as a cautious but significant development. Analysts stress, however, that the true test lies in endurance, whether coordination can remain seamless over weeks and months rather than days. Convoys remain fueled and mobile. Surveillance aircraft continue silent arcs across the desert expanse. Joint planning rooms operate without pause. And according to senior officials briefed on classified projections, the alliance may soon transition into a broader regional stabilization initiative, one that extends beyond military containment into structured governance support and economic corridor protection. If that phase unfolds as anticipated, the Sahel will not merely witness a security adjustment, but the gradual emergence of a new continental alignment whose long-term implications are only beginning to surface. By the end of the first operational cycle, internal assessments reportedly indicated measurable shifts in territorial monitoring capacity. Command officials noted that areas previously considered intermittently accessible were now under sustained aerial observation, while supply corridors showed reduced disruption incidents compared to prior weeks. However, the tone inside strategic briefings remained cautious. Analysts warned that insurgent groups often enter a period of tactical silence before recalibrating. Intelligence fusion teams flagged subtle patterns, unusual fuel purchases in remote markets, sporadic encrypted communications bursts, and small-scale movement across lesser-known desert paths. None confirmed imminent confrontation, but together they suggested adaptation rather than retreat. In response, the Joint Command Structure initiated what sources describe as a stability layering protocol. This involves overlapping patrol grids, rotating rapid response units, and synchronized surveillance windows designed to prevent predictable gaps in coverage. Egyptian technical officers are believed to be fine-tuning coordination algorithms that help anticipate movement based on terrain and historical activity patterns. On the civilian front, government officials in Ouagadougou have begun emphasizing reconstruction narratives alongside security updates. Public addresses reference road rehabilitation, agricultural corridor protection, and expanded telecommunications access as parallel pillars of the alliance's long-term strategy. The message is clear: security is being framed not as an end in itself, but as a foundation for economic renewal. Meanwhile, discreet diplomatic outreach continues. Observers suggest that several African states are weighing whether closer alignment with the AES Egypt framework could strengthen their own border stabilization efforts. While no public commitments have been announced, strategic analysts describe the situation as fluid and evolving. International actors are also recalibrating quietly. Intelligence services outside the region are closely monitoring the operational model, assessing whether the alliance's integrated approach alters long-standing power balances. Though official reactions remain restrained, policy discussions in foreign capitals are reportedly intensifying. In northern Burkina Faso, joint patrol units have begun incorporating local liaison officers into their movements, an effort aimed at strengthening trust and improving ground-level intelligence flow. Community leaders in certain districts have cautiously welcomed the increased visibility, though they stress that long-term confidence will depend on sustained stability rather than short-term presence. Cyber monitoring teams remain on alert. Analysts warn that destabilization efforts may increasingly target digital infrastructure or attempt to manipulate narratives around the alliance's activities. To counter this, communication channels between command centers have been reinforced with layered encryption and backup systems. As another night settles over the Sahel, the operational tempo remains steady but controlled. No dramatic clashes, no sweeping offensives, just incremental consolidation, recalibration, and watchful anticipation. Senior planners reportedly believe that the coming phase will determine whether the alliance transitions from controlled stabilization into proactive containment. That shift, if initiated, would involve deeper cross-border synchronization and expanded rapid response authority. For now, armored vehicles remain positioned along strategic arteries, surveillance platforms continue scanning the horizon, and policy architects refine long-term integration blueprints. And according to sources within the High-Level Strategic Council, discussions are already underway about a broader continental security charter, one that could formally institutionalize this emerging alignment and redefine cooperative defense mechanisms across multiple African regions in ways few anticipated just weeks ago. As deliberations over a broader continental security charter quietly advance, internal documents circulating within the Joint Command reportedly outline an ambitious second-stage objective: synchronized border stabilization zones extending beyond Burkina Faso's immediate frontiers. While publicly framed as defensive coordination, insiders describe it as a blueprint for seamless operational continuity across allied territories. In recent days, additional Egyptian logistics aircraft have been observed landing under tight security protocols. Though officials maintain that troop numbers remain limited and advisory-focused, the expansion of supply chains suggests preparation for prolonged engagement. Fuel reserves, mobile communications hubs, and modular field infrastructure are reportedly being reinforced to sustain high operational tempo if required. On the ground, patrol behavior has subtly shifted once again. Rather than visible convoy movements alone, smaller joint units are now operating in discrete patterns, rotating through rural sectors with minimal public signaling. Defense analysts interpret this as an effort to build quiet dominance rather than dramatic displays of force. Intelligence assessments continue to indicate insurgent recalibration. Intercepted chatter points to possible attempts at strategic distraction, probing less guarded regions while avoiding concentrated alliance presence. In response, surveillance grids have reportedly widened, with layered reconnaissance covering both high-risk zones and peripheral transit corridors. Within Ouagadougou's secured command complex, scenario simulations are being updated daily. Planners are said to be modeling potential escalation triggers, including coordinated attacks on symbolic targets or attempts to disrupt infrastructure tied to economic revival efforts. Contingency frameworks emphasize speed, precision, and controlled messaging to prevent panic. Diplomatic undercurrents remain just as active. Delegations from multiple African states are rumored to be studying the operational doctrine now taking shape. Some analysts believe that if the alliance demonstrates sustained stability gains, it could inspire parallel cooperative arrangements in other regions facing similar security challenges. Meanwhile, public messaging inside Burkina Faso continues to blend caution with optimism. Officials highlight incremental improvements, safer transit routes, expanded patrol reach, restored municipal operations, while avoiding bold declarations of victory. The narrative is carefully calibrated to project confidence without underestimating the complexity of the threat environment. Cyber intelligence units have also detected growing digital narratives attempting to frame the alliance as a destabilizing force. Authorities insist that countermeasures are in place, but the information domain is emerging as an increasingly active front. As the next operational cycle approaches, anticipation builds around what insiders describe as a coordinated field validation exercise. Though not officially labeled as an offensive, it is expected to test interoperability across multiple command layers simultaneously: air surveillance, ground maneuver, logistics coordination, and rapid response deployment. Armored units remain fueled but stationary at key staging points. Surveillance aircraft continue silent rotations across desert expanses. Inside briefing rooms, commanders review live maps illuminated by shifting markers that represent more than troop movements. They represent a fragile but deliberate reshaping of regional power dynamics. And according to senior officials familiar with classified projections, the coming days may reveal whether this alliance transitions fully into proactive containment, a step that could redefine not only the Sahel's security trajectory but also the broader architecture of African military cooperation. What unfolds next, however, remains tightly guarded behind secured doors. As the anticipated field validation exercise moved from planning to execution, the shift was subtle but unmistakable. Before dawn, synchronized movements were initiated across multiple operational sectors. Surveillance platforms adjusted altitude patterns. Ground units repositioned simultaneously. Logistics teams activated predefined mobility corridors. Unlike previous patrol cycles, this operation unfolded with near-silent coordination. Within hours, Alliance forces had secured several long-disputed transit routes without significant confrontation. Intelligence sources indicated that insurgent elements, aware of the expanded surveillance grid, avoided direct engagement and instead withdrew deeper into isolated pockets. Analysts described it as a strategic displacement rather than a defeat, but nonetheless a measurable disruption of established operational patterns. The Joint Command Center in Ouagadougou reported improved response times, streamlined communication exchanges, and seamless integration between reconnaissance feeds and field maneuver units. Egyptian advisory officers reportedly confirmed that interoperability benchmarks had been successfully met during live coordination drills embedded within the operation. More importantly, no major retaliatory incident materialized during the exercise window. By the end of the 72-hour cycle, internal assessments concluded that the alliance had achieved three critical objectives. 1. Demonstrated functional integration of cross-regional command structures. 2. Established sustained surveillance dominance over key corridors. 3. Reopened limited humanitarian and commercial access routes under controlled security. Publicly, officials maintained a measured tone. Ibrahim Traore addressed the nation briefly, emphasizing resilience, sovereignty, and the importance of patience. Egyptian representatives reiterated that their mission remained focused on stabilization and African solidarity, not permanent occupation. Behind closed doors, however, the strategic tone was more decisive. Senior planners reportedly agreed that the alliance had moved beyond its experimental phase. What began as a symbolic deployment had matured into an operationally functional security partnership. The Rapid Continental Response Task Group, initially conceptual, was formally activated with rotational readiness status. Border intelligence synchronization protocols were codified into standing procedure. At the diplomatic level, quiet acknowledgements followed. While some global powers remained cautious, none openly challenged the framework. Several African states signaled interest in structured dialogue with the alliance, not as members yet, but as observers evaluating potential collaboration. On the ground in Burkina Faso, incremental changes began to take root. Markets in certain northern towns operated with fewer interruptions. Aid deliveries moved more consistently. Civil administrators cautiously extended service hours. None of these developments signaled complete stability, but together, they indicated momentum. Security analysts cautioned that insurgent networks would likely adapt again. The struggle for long-term stabilization in the Sahel remains complex and deeply layered. Yet the alliance's first coordinated operational cycle demonstrated something new: African-led synchronization across regions previously operating in fragmented silos. As the final operational review concluded, armored units remained positioned but no longer on heightened mobilization. Surveillance grids continued steady rotation. Command rooms dimmed slightly, shifting from crisis tempo to sustained oversight rhythm. In Cairo and Ouagadougou alike, policymakers began transitioning discussion from emergency coordination to institutional continuity. The broader Continental Security Charter, once speculative, enter drafting phase for formal presentation at a future African Defense Summit. The message emerging from this unfolding chapter is clear. Egypt's entry into the AES did not produce immediate dramatic battles or sweeping territorial reclamations. Instead, it triggered structural recalibration, a recalibration that quietly altered command speed, surveillance depth, and strategic alignment across the Sahel. Whether this alignment will endure future pressures remains uncertain. The Sahel has a history of testing every coalition that attempts to reshape it. But for now, the alliance stands intact, operational, and cautiously advancing, marking a new phase in African security cooperation that few predicted would unfold so rapidly. And as the dust settles over the desert corridors, one reality is undeniable. The geopolitical map of the Sahel has shifted, not with a single explosion, but with coordinated steps that may echo far beyond the region in the years to come. Thank you for watching.
You go, I think I really think joining Abraham Traore in AES like forming alliance with the North Africans, like forming alliance with Egypt is the best thing for this nation to do. I really think because Abraham Traore having a lot of enemies, people who seriously don't want him, or people who seriously want him out of the way, should find every possible means to protect himself. And I think that's what he's trying to do, or that's what he's doing, he has migrated from France, their past colonizers, to Russia. Abraham Traore has met Vladimir Putin, form alliance with them in order to get protection from this country. So I think aligning himself or aligning his countries with some of all these big countries will be the best way for him, at least to guarantee his security for the meantime. Because can someone tell me the reason why each day he's having a lot of enemies, he's accumulating enemies? People really don't like him because he's doing the best. He's simply doing the best for his countries. Come to some other West African countries. Most of their citizens are seriously angry with their president. But this is a country I've seen so far that its citizens, so most of the citizens, so much love their president. Most of their citizens so much love their president. Can you say the same in your country? Which country are you from? Can I know in your comment section? Can you say that you actually love your president? Can you say too? Can you say that majority of the people in your country actually love their president? As for me, I can't say so because in case you don't know, I'm coming from one of the most populated country in Africa. I don't know. I think it should be the most populated, if I'm not mistaken. The most populated black nation in the world. I don't need to call the name before you know the country I'm talking about. But the citizens are really suffering. Like the citizens are really suffering despite all the resources we have. They are suffering. They are crying each day. Everything has become politics in my country. Everything has become politics. No more human sympathy. No more government of the people, by the people, and for the people. I think that's what democracy is all about. But we don't get that in our country, So this is why you see us glamoring, clapping, cheering Abraham Traore in another country. So why will anybody want to attempt to remove Abraham Traore despite all the joy people in his country have? Why will anybody want him out of office? Anyway, let me know your view on the comment section. Do not forget, like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you once again, and see you in our next video. Bye.